Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg, and I'm here to talk about Magic Realm. If that name sounds really antiquated to you, that's because it is. This is a board game from 1979, and it's the most unique board game I've ever played. I really feel like a board game hipster here. Just even saying the words Magic Realm. It really is a league of its own of nerdiness. Like, there's casual board gamers, there's hardcore board gamers, and then there's people that play stuff like Magic Realm. Or, you know, I don't know, a lot of like those 1980s war games about just, you know, 100-hour World War II campaigns or what, you know, it's just like, yeah, really, there's nothing like Magic Realm. There isn't. And that's why people still play it. Because there just isn't anything that can really compare to it after all these years. It really is. It was ahead of its time, and yet at the same time, it's in its own time. It's in its own magic realm. Alright, so basically, in 1979, this company called Avalon Hill, who were big into all these war games and things like that, they were seeing the surging success of Dungeons and Dragons. And they decided they wanted to get in on that success. But rather than making a role-playing game that, you know, could compete with D&D, they went another route. They wanted a board game. They wanted a board game that could encapsulate the entire experience of playing Dungeons and Dragons. So they hired one guy to make it. A gentleman by the name of Richard Hamblin. And Richard Hamblin spent like 3 years or so, it was something like that, just working on Magic Realm. And it was released in 1979. And I'm sure people in 1979 didn't know what the fuck to make of this thing. Because people nowadays don't know what the fuck to make of this thing. It's massive. It's so hard to even describe. It's complex. It's complex in an arcane way. It's one of the hardest games to learn how to play. I've spent the last few days, like hour upon hour, just trying to comprehend how to play it. And that's with like all the modern tutorials that people have written just to try to help people understand how it works. It's weighted 4.52 out of 5 on BGG, which is one of the highest weights on BGG, at least for games with a certain, you know, certain number of ratings. But you know, like Spirit Island, which I just played and did a video of, that was weighted only 4.0, which is, I mean, that's pretty far up there. And yet Spirit Island is relatively easy to learn. And that's the thing. It's like modern board games that are heavy tend to just sort of gradually introduce you to these sort of logical mechanics and systems and things like that. Magic Realm just hits you over the head with a fucking brick of illogicalness, you know, of just things that, I mean, a lot of it does sort of make sense, and there's almost a certain beauty in how a lot of it does make sense. And then there's things just like, well, your name isn't Richard Hamlin, so you don't get it, but these are the rules. And you just have to memorize things and learn things and just go with the flow. So this is going to be a series. This is going to be a series of videos in which I guess teach you how to play. I won't teach you everything because I don't know everything, and there's a lot of stuff that you don't really need to know just to sort of grok the basics. This won't be comprehensive. It won't, after you finish the series, it won't be like, all right, well, let me buy the game and just get some friends over and let's go. Which is sort of hilarious just to think about. After watching a series of videos on it, you won't be ready to just play it. But I think, you know, once you get past the basics and you just start building on top of it, eventually it does reach a point, which is where I think where I'm at, where it's like I got all the basics down, and that's where I feel comfortable now sharing them with you. There's just a lot of intricacies. There's a lot of little interactions that can pop up, and you just don't know how to deal with it. And that's why the rule book, if we see here in the fabulously titled Rules of Magic Realm version 3.2c, you can see that the rule book is 270 pages long. And a lot of that, well, I mean, first of all, you have the advanced and optional rules. Okay, so from 181 on there, you don't need to know any of that. I mean, that's entirely optional stuff that just makes the game a bit more complex or fixes certain things that have popped up over the years and blah, 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 blah. You don't need to know any of that. Then 211 onwards is all the appendix. So this just tells you like a list of all the different monsters in the game, spells in the game, treasures in the game. I mean, that's entirely just reference material. Page 259 there, the least you need to know to play Magic Realm. That's probably what you should start with if you want to just read something. That is the very least you need to know. So really then, and at the start, basically, the basic rule starts at page 23. It's just sort of exhaustive. In every little rule is sort of discussed and mentioned and broken up and you know. But like moving. I mean, moving here is 6 pages. But moving is not complicated. I mean, moving is really the easiest thing in the game. It's just there's so many little things that can pop up that on these fringe things that you might want to read about just exactly when they clarify. So I have not read this whole rulebook. I've not even read like 10% of this rulebook. It's really almost a reference material. So, you know, it's fun to say, yeah, the rulebook is 270 pages long, but that's not really accurate. I'm not trying to trivialize that the game is hard to get into, but it's manageable. Once you're on the other side and you start to grok everything, you realize that it is manageable. Okay. I say that now until we get to the combat section. First of all, this video, I don't intend to be very long. I just want to get introduced to things. I haven't even explained what Magic Realm really is. Magic Realm is a game for 1 to 16 players. Which I don't know if any, I'm sure someone out there has played with 16 players, but that's got to be pretty rare. It's perfectly playable solitaire. I would say the majority of Magic Realm players probably play solo or have spent a good chunk of time playing solo. I'm told that the game really shines with at least 4 or 5. But more than 10 starts to get a little rough, just due to the time it takes and all that kind of stuff, and all the interactions. So far, obviously, I've only played solo. I would love to play with other people, and I will probably force my friends to play with me at some point. In the game, you create a world. Let's just go ahead and do that. So this mod is just handles all the setup for you practically. So it's just populating all the treasure cards. It's adding all the monsters you're going to fight and things like that. And then it creates the map for you. And the map, normally, you and any other players in the game, you create it utilizing these 20 tiles. Every single game of Magic Realm uses the exact same 20 tiles. Every game. So you will become very familiar with each one of these 20 tiles because they never change. The only thing that changes is their placement and their orientation. So, you know, their rotation and which other tiles they connect to. And then basically there's some little chits, and I'm going to be using the word chit a lot, so get your giggles out of the way, I guess. There's these little chits that go across all the board, and it's hidden at the start. These chits are revealed once a player goes to those tiles and reveals them. And those tiles, basically, those little chits determine what monsters can appear on that tile and what treasure locations can appear on that tile. So every game of Magic Realm is going to be different, because the map is always going to look a little different in some fundamental way, and the treasure and monster locations are always going to be different. So, you know, here in this tile, the Deep Woods, one game, this might just have, it might just have a couple monster tiles. It might just have like a dragon tile and like a troll tile or something like that. And it might only just pump out dragons and trolls. And that's it. And no, you can't get any treasure from it whatsoever. In another game, it might produce serpents and it might have the vault on it. In which case you can loot the vault for a whole bunch of awesome treasure. So there's if you see here, there's a certain number of treasure locations. There's 8. The Hoard, the Lair, the Altar, the Shrine, the Pool, the Vault, the Cairns, and the Statue. These are always in play. Every game. Somewhere. Every treasure card in the game, every treasure is in play in some location. You don't know where it is at the start. So say you really want to get the glowing orb. I don't, you know, whatever. I mean, I don't think you'd specifically be searching for something like that, but say you really want, or what's a good one? The Lost Keys. Say you really want the Lost Keys because you found the chest. So you found the location of the chest. And the only way to open the chest is if you have the Lost Keys. That's a problem because you don't know, you might not know where the Lost Keys are. They're somewhere across the entire board in any number of locations. Vice versa, you find the Lost Keys, you don't know where the chest is. That's very tricky for a solo player. But say you're playing with 7 other people. Somebody has a good chance of finding the chest. Someone else has a good chance of finding the Lost Keys throughout the course of the game. They could work together in order to, say, split whatever's in the chest. There's 2 treasures in the chest, which are going to be very good. They could split the difference. But then, say, one of them, the person who actually, I mean, they could both grab the treasures, and then one player turns around and backstabs the other and kills them and takes both. Blah, 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 blah. We'll get to some of that later. The point is, it's a fantasy adventure. You are playing one of 16 different characters. That's why the player count is 16. They all could be in play at once. You're playing one of these 16 characters plopped into this world and you embark on a fantasy adventure in search of monsters to kill, in search of treasures to find, in search of fame, money, notoriety, spells, all sorts of different things. And it's such an organic experience, because every game is going to be different. You don't know where you're going to start on the map, really. I mean, somewhat, a little bit you do, but not really. You don't know where the treasures are going to be. You don't know what monsters are going to pop up. You don't know what other players are going to be doing. I mean, it's just so very... It's basically like... You know how randomizers are such a popular thing nowadays in like speedrunning and video games? This is a randomizer board game, you know? It's just a big shuffle of fun that can change every single time. And you read about, certain like people's stories and say, I've played 200 games of Magic Realm and I saw this thing happen once and it was just incredible. You know, it's just like anything can really happen, especially once you involve other players and you get all the player interaction involved. And yeah, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's so weird that this game from 1979, it just blows my mind how just impressive it is. And more people should know about it. More people should know about it. But I think it is a thing that's really best shared by someone that knows the game and just sharing it with people they know and teaching them that way, rather than just like me picking up a rule book or whatever, you know, this big lengthy thing and just tackling it. You know, it is something that some people need to tackle in order to learn, because who's going to teach me how to play Magic Realm? But I really took it as like a challenge. I'm like, I can pretty much learn any board game. And then I saw this mentioned of like complex board games for solo players. And I'm like, huh, this game, apparently people really like this old game and it's really complicated. I'm going to try to learn it. Little did I know. But yes. Every game is easier to learn when somebody teaches you. All right. So, right, so this mod generated this map for us. We could just click retry and it will generate a completely different one for us, using the exact same 20 tiles every time, but you can see the orientation is different, the layout is different, and you could just keep doing that all day to create, you know, wildly different maps. And maybe to you it doesn't look that different, but it obviously is quite a bit different. And this is before we even get into like locations and dwellings and things like that. So let's just take this. Okay, so it's granted us a random character of the 16. So it's given us the Amazon. Yeah, very stern looking Amazon there. Now, just for reference, if you're curious about the 16 characters, we have the Amazon, the Berserker, the Black Knight, the Captain, the Druid, the Dwarf, the Elf, the Magician, the Pilgrim, the Sorcerer, the Swordsman, the White Knight, the Witch King, the Wizard, and the Woods Girl. 16 like fantasy classes in 1979. I mean, the Berserker, the Amazon, the Magician, the Sorcerer, the White Knight, the Witch King, the Wizard. I mean, this is crazy. Okay. Now, all of these characters, as I've been learning, I've sort of been mentally comparing it a lot of times to Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. You know, a computer game that I'm pretty fond of that's very sort of retro style roguelike, that's really like tough to get into and actually get good at. So I've been making comparisons, but in Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup, there's a whole bunch of like characters or classes and things like that you can start with, but every character is fundamentally the same, and you can do anything with any character. It's just sort of their aptitudes that are different and certain little small bonuses and advantages. In this game, every character has a number of differences. One is their weight / their vulnerability. This can be sort of interpreted as like their natural, I guess weight is sort of the best term. I was going to say defense, and it is. If they're unarmored, that is important. If they're unarmored, that sort of determines how heavy of a hit they can take without instantly dying. So, you know, if a light character goes around unarmored and they take a big hit, they are dead. Whereas if someone that's really heavy, they could take heavier hits without insta dying, although it is still painful. It also sort of determines their general sort of build, as far as like what they're good at and what they can carry with them naturally, the sort of weapons they can use. A heavy character such as the Berserker can carry and use like great axes and things like that, which makes sense. I would, you know, it makes sense. Whereas someone like the Woods Girl, who's very light and, you know, mobile, she can only use like light bows and short swords and things like that. And we'll get into all that eventually. So the Amazon is medium weight, so she's middle of the road. Special advantages. She has aim, so she subtracts 1 from each die roll whenever she rolls on the missile table to attack with a missile weapon. Basically, in other words, she's good with bows or crossbows. Again, makes sense. Stamina. She can record into an extra move phase each turn. And she even gets this bonus when she's riding a horse. So she can move more each turn than any other character. But it's a bonus move or an extra move, which is really valuable because some things in the game will restrict how many actions you can do per turn. And getting an extra thing always adds on top of that. So extra phases are never restricted. So yeah, she can move a lot, which is good. So she's mobile, she's medium weight. It's a solid starting character. Now, she's good with bows, but she doesn't actually start with a bow. She starts with a short sword, which is a pretty shitty weapon. So getting her a bow can be a route you can take. And that's not as easy as, you know, a lot of RPGs you might play where it's just like, oh yeah, here's a bow. Pay 5 gold, here's a bow. It's a little trickier than that. So she could go down the route of trying to get a hold of a bow in order to use the aim advantage, or she could just try and find a slightly heavier melee weapon and go that route. The melee route is viable because she starts with a bunch of armor. A lot of characters do not start with any armor. Some characters start with full plate armor, which is pretty good. It's very defensive. She starts with just a good mix. She's got a helmet, a shield, and a breastplate. And we'll get into the whole combat system probably next video. But she's armored. It's not incredible armor. She's not going to be soaking hits from like giant trolls and things like that. It's just sort of middle of the road armor that's good against like, you know, a lot of little attacks. Okay. Then each character has different relationships with the various native entities of the world, the various sort of non-monster NPCs, you might think of them. And if we go over here, you can see there's 4 here, there's 5 more here, there's different groups. So like you have the Order of the Knights, that always exist at the chapel. So wherever the chapel is on the board, and there will always be a chapel, that's where the knights are. Okay. And at the house, wherever the house is, you have the soldiers. So that's where these groups of soldiers will always be. This isn't actually done setting up yet, so there's a lot missing. But the guards at the guardhouse, that's where the guards are. They're always going to be there. They don't move, they don't leave. If you go to the guardhouse, unless, you know, you do something to change that, the guards will be there. And then the rogues at the end. So these 4 are always on the map, unless, you know, players change that situation. These other 5, they can come and go, and they're not always going to be there, and you sort of have to, you maybe have to wait around at different locations in order for these to show up. The company, the woodfolk, the patrol, the lancers, and the raiders. Yeah, so all these different natives, you can have different relationships with each of them. So the Amazon is friendly with the lancers, the patrol, and the shaman. The shaman is a visitor. I won't even talk about that, but they can also pop up occasionally. Friendly with the lancers and the patrol, unfriendly with the company and the bashkars. Now, basically, if I go over here to the little reference, I don't want to bog you down too much. Again, we're trying to keep this light to start. But basically, you can trade with any of those groups. Each of them has things for sale every game. Some of those things are always the same. They're always static. If I lift this up, you can see that the knights, or the knights at the order at the chapel, knights of the order in the chapel. I'm fucking this up now. They always have 3 war horses to sell. So you can always buy war horses from them. They always sell 2 suits of armor. Where is it? 2 suits of armor. There you go. 2 suits of armor are always for sale. And they always sell 5 heavy weapons. So if you want to buy a heavy weapon, you probably want to seek out the chapel. Okay. In addition to that, they also sell 2 treasure cards. These treasure cards are taken from the pool of all the treasure cards in the game at the start. So those 2 treasure cards could be anything. Practically. I mean, I don't want to go into the setup process, but it could be practically anything. It could be the lost keys. It could be, you know, the glowing orb. It could be a potion. It could be, you know, just one of any number of things could be at the chapel. And so, you know, it's not a bad idea. Every character is going to start at one of these 4 places. It's not a bad idea at the start of the game to just pop your head in, see what they're selling as far as treasure cards go, see if it might be of interest, see if you might want to buy it right away, which is usually unlikely, or, you know, keep it in mind for later on when you could afford it. You might want to pop back and buy it. Okay, let me just reorganize this. All right. Right. So, being friendly with a group basically changes the table that you roll on when you're interacting with them, when you're trying to buy from them and things like that. So if you're friendly with a group, you have a better chance of getting a better price on anything you buy from them. So, you know, all these things have a listed gold value. If I wanted to buy this war horse, for example, that would cost 18 gold by default, which is a fuck ton, by the way. It's very expensive. Because chances are, most of the time, you're not going to pay 18 gold. Because if you're neutral with them, you can see that these dice rolls, and we'll get into dice rolls soon, the prices listed here are ×3 and ×4. So if you have no special relationship with them, you can expect to pay 3 or 4 times the price if you really just want to buy it outright. Now, and you can see a couple of those, a couple of those dice rolls. It's just no deal. They don't even want to trade with you that turn. You also have a chance to sort of roll on the next higher table. So you might get to roll on the friendly table where you could maybe pay only twice the price. But you also have a chance to sort of piss them off in your negotiations. And you might insult them. And you have to lose notoriety or fame, or they might just block you entirely, which prevents you from doing any further actions that day. You know, it gets rough. So being on friendly terms with these groups gives you better odds of getting better prices, eventually maybe even getting it at the base price, believe it or not, or if you roll incredibly well, you could even get it for free. You get it for free, but it pisses them off and you drop back down. So it might be worth it depending on it, but yeah. These prices or these tables also concern when you try to hire the natives. Yes. So they're not just there to, buy stuff from or sell stuff to. You can also hire them to accompany you on your journeys, or you can hire them to go off elsewhere and do work for your benefit. You can hire them to go off and find the lair and loot the lair and maybe come back and bring back the treasures that they find. And that's not an automated thing. That's not like, I'm going to roll a dice and see what happens. And, oh, they got a 3, so I get 2 treasures. No, all of that is done manually by you. You could also hire them to go kill other players. But again, we'll get into the extents of what's possible later. Okay, so that's being on friendly terms. That's good. Unfriendly, obviously it's harder to buy stuff from them. Because if you look at this unfriendly table here, most of these options are either they're not going to sell it to you, or you're just pissing them off, or it gets worse. The best chance you could get is 4 times the price, which is not good. And then the enemy table, which I think you have to... I think some characters start with some things on enemy level. But that's just all bad. I mean, you're not buying anything from an enemy. And basically, if you end your turn while on the same space as someone that you're unfriendly with, or neutral with, because it could get worse. You could piss them off during the night. There is a chance that you will get into a battle with them. They'll, words will be said, and they might just try and fight you. So that can happen if you hang around people that you're on unfriendly terms with. So every character has different relationships with the different natives, and that's part of the playing strategy and part of how you decide actions to take throughout the game. Okay. Also, every character, like I said, starts in one of those 4 locations. Basically, every single character of the 16, I believe, can start in the inn. So if you're playing with a lot of people, the inn can be very crowded at the start. Because every character can start there. Most of the character, or a lot of the characters, can start in one of the other 3 locations. The chapel, the house, or the guard house. So the Amazon just starts at the inn. No choice about it. Then you get these little chits, these little tokens that all have a letter on it, a number on it, and little asterisks. I don't want to get into this video because it's mostly to do with combat, and that's a whole ball of worms. As you can see by this confrontation chart of combat. Basically, though, for non-combat purposes, a character can't carry anything. Well, basically, the letter determines how heavy of a thing you can carry. And really all right. Let me explain. Okay. The letter corresponds to weight. All right. So there's basically 4 weights in the game. There's light, which is the L. There's medium, which is the M. There's heavy, which is the H. And then there's tremendous, which is the T, which I don't have access to. So those are the 4 weights. There's also one step below light, which is negligible, but, that's not important. So, for the fight charts, the fight chits, the orange ones, you can't use any lower weight chit when dealing with any heavier weapon. Okay, so my short sword is a light weapon, so I can use L's, M's, or H's. L is the minimum, so I can use everything at the minimum and above it. If I were to ever say upgrade the Amazon's weapon to a medium weapon, like a broadsword or something like that. Actually, broadsword might be heavy, I don't remember. Whatever, a mace. A medium weapon. I would not be able to use my light chit for that weapon. I would not be able to use it in combat. I only have one of those, so that's really not a big deal. The Amazon probably wants to upgrade to a medium weapon because most of its stuff is M's. Most of her stuff is M's or H. So, yeah, depending on the weight of the various tokens you have, the various chits you have, that sort of determines what weapon you can use or you'd like to use, you'd be good at using. There's another thing with that, but we'll wait for the next video. The movement ones, that determines essentially the heaviest equipment that you can carry with you, or the heaviest treasures that you can carry with you. So I have all M chits for movement. So they're all medium. I can carry light stuff. I can carry negligible stuff, of course. And I can carry medium stuff without a care in the world. No problem. As soon as I pick up a heavy thing, though, if I were to pick up, say, a great axe, I would be fucked. I would literally not be able to move. Because I do not have... If I had a single H movement, if this one right here was like an H4 instead, I would be able to carry heavy stuff just fine. As long as that wasn't like fatigued or, it wasn't active. But yeah, to determine what you can carry, it's your highest weighted movement chit. So I can only carry movement stuff, medium stuff. Which is potentially a bummer. Not because I want to use like heavy weapons or armor, but some of the good treasure you might find is heavy, or even is tremendous. So like here, if we look at the Bejeweled Dwarf Vest in the lower left, you can see an M. So this is a medium weight treasure. But this one, the Blasted Jewel, is a heavy treasure. So if the Amazon tried to grab this out of a vault or something and tried to carry it back to town, she would not be able to normally, because she's just not heavy enough. She's not strong enough, I guess. Now that can be alleviated in a few ways. One is I could hire someone to carry it, such as one of these knights who are tremendous weighted. So, or the guards, they're heavy weighted, so they could carry it. If I hired them and they followed me around, I could just have them carry it and we'd be all happy. I could also get a workhorse or something. You know, I could get a horse to go with me that can carry heavy stuff or tremendous stuff. So, yeah. All right. So, in general, before we get into the combat thing, basically these tokens, the letters at least, determine your general weight and weight capabilities. So again, Amazon, middle of the road. Okay, so right, what we're looking at then, we got all the maps set up here, all the tiles are set up, and all of the discovery things and the warning things, all the little monster and loot stuff has been distributed and shuffled. So now all of these tiles have been randomized in as far as what monsters can appear there and what treasures can appear there based on these tokens, which are face down. So once a character ends a turn there, those will be flipped over and you'll be able to see what the tile contains, whether there's loot there or not. There are other ways to look at those ahead of time, but blah blah blah. All right, so we're basically set up here. We're starting at the inn. Now keep in mind, we don't know where the inn is. Okay. That's the thing. You pick your character after the map has been built, but before you know where the dwellings are. So you don't know where the inn is, you don't know where the chapel is, you don't know where the house is. You have a vague idea, and I'll tell you why. Map tiles fall into one of four categories, which again sounds daunting. Just hold on. It's not that complicated. There are valleys. Valleys are the safest of the four. Okay, valleys contain the four dwellings, and then one of the valleys contains ghosts. And the ghosts are the only monsters that are ever going to appear on a valley by default. And so I think the Witch King starts on the ghost tile, but everyone else, you don't have to worry about the ghosts. You're going to be starting on one of the dwellings. So there are 5 valley tiles. And they all have very 1979 names, like the Cursed Valley, or the Evil Valley, or the Dark Valley, the Awful Valley, and the Bad Valley. All right, you got that? So, as a player, I know that I'm going to be starting on one of those 5 valley tiles. I don't know which one. It could be any of them. It's completely randomized which one of those 5. And this map is kind of a little interesting because I've seen maps where 4 or 5 of the valleys are all connected. They're all next to each other. This one's pretty varied. We've got the dark one all the way at the top. We've got the awful right in the middle. And then you got the bad here, the cursed here, and the evil here. So they're all fairly spread out from one another, which... yeah. So you pick your character after the map has been built, but before you know where you're starting. And that could have some implications. Like the dwarf character, he wants to be in caves, so you might not pick the dwarf because you might have a pretty bad chance of starting near any caves. Basically the Evil Valley here is connected here, but these two aren't connected in a good way to any caves. I mean, eventually, of course, you can get to anything for the most part, but the Dark Valley isn't really connected to any great cave systems. the Awful Valley is, but that's a 1 in 5 chance. So, you know, you might not. Or the Woods Girl. She really likes woods tiles. She gets a lot of benefits in woods tiles, and so she specifically likes the deep woods. Because that's a really great place for her to look for treasure in the deep woods. So, you know, if she started in the Evil Valley as a woods girl, that's really good. But the odds of that are kind of slim. And the fact that the Cursed Valley does not connect straight to the deep woods due to these roads, it basically means if I picked the woods girl and I didn't start in the Evil Valley, I'd be kind of fucked. I'd be, you know, a little pissed. The deep woods is just very inconvenient to get to otherwise. So that might be a consideration. But yeah, so let's resume setup. We're gonna find out where the inn is placed, and we're gonna find out where we're going. So the Evil Valley ended up being the ghost one. So there are the two ghosts. They're just hanging out there. No one will probably ever go to the Evil Valley because it doesn't connect to anything. The house ended up in the Cursed Valley. The guards ended up in the Bad Valley. The inn is in the Awful Valley. And the chapel is all the way up in here in the Dark Valley. And this actually needs to change. You can see this would be really shitty if this were the case, because this would mean that by default, no one could get to the chapel the way these roads are set up. So there's a rule that, well, for a couple of considerations, but basically after dwellings are placed, dwellings are always placed on the 5th spot in each valley. But if the 5th spot ever doesn't connect to the Borderlands tile right here, and that's basically the rule when building the map, is that everything has to connect to the Borderlands tile, or mostly has to connect. So if the dwelling does not connect to the Borderlands, you move it to the 4th spot. And so then now people can get there. Yeah, I think everything else is fine. Yeah, okay. All right, so here's the inn. We are starting at the inn, which is right next to the Borderlands. And yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's okay. It's from the Borderlands. You can head over to the caves. You could head up into the mountains, over to the high pass, or the ledges. I mean, we're pretty close to a lot of action here. All right, so we take our little token, we put it on the inn with the rogues. We're neutral with the rogues, so we could trade from them, we could buy from them, but the prices are going to be exorbitant. Almost every character starts with 10 gold. Some characters don't, but most characters start with 10 gold. And I actually skipped a step. I actually skipped an important step. I'm sorry. Before you place your character. So, after you've selected the character you want to play, but before you reveal dwellings and where you go, you need to determine your victory requirements. So every player chooses for themselves what they need to do in order to win the game. And that's this victory requirement thing. So the various things you can do are acquire great treasures, which are just a handful of specific treasures that are spread around the game in different places. Acquire usable spells, so basically learning new spells. Acquiring a certain amount of fame. Acquiring a certain amount of notoriety, or acquiring a certain amount of gold. So I think the treasures, the spells, the gold, that's all pretty self-explanatory. You get the idea for that. Now, I will note that monsters never drop gold. Gold only usually comes from selling treasure or from killing natives. Every native on the board has a certain gold value that they drop when they die. But that makes sense. I mean, why would you really expect monsters to have gold? And why would a troll have fucking gold on them, you know? So you don't get gold from monsters. What you do get from monsters is fame and notoriety. They're not really two sides of the same coin, because most monsters give both fame and notoriety. If we look at the monster board here, and I just grab, say, a flying dragon, ignoring everything else, you can see that killing this flying dragon gives you 5 notoriety and 5 fame. Killing this giant troll gives you 8 notoriety and 8 fame. Now, a little bonus, which is important to know, is that when you do a battle, you can do a battle with a number of opponents at the same time, which you'll see once we get to that. For every monster you kill after the first one, their notoriety and fame values double. That's not the right way to phrase it. Basically, the second one is worth double, the third one is worth 3 times, the fourth one is worth 4 times. So if I killed if I killed these 2 trolls, the first one I'd get 5 notoriety, 5 fame. The second one I'd get 10 notoriety and 10 fame for a total of 15 of each. Now, that's only in the same battle if you kill them. So if I kill one and then the next day I kill the other, they would each be worth 5. But it's not just for same types of monsters. If I'm in a battle with, this thing and this thing and this octopus, and I killed the spider first, and then the giant, and then the octopus, that would be 3, then 16, then 24 for a fairly big number. That fight would also be insane. And I don't think you would kill the octopus last. But anyways. Right, so, victory point requirements. Basically, you get 5 points to spread out however you want among these 5 categories. So you could do this, 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 this. Which means, if I did it that way, I would need, by the end of the game, 1 great treasure in my possession, 2 usable spells, 10 fame points, 20 notoriety points, and 30 gold. That's a very balanced thing, but I don't think most people would ever do that. Alternatively, I could just do this. And basically, I don't give a shit about anything else going on in the game. I just need 5 great treasures by the end of the game. And if I get 5 great treasures at the end of the game, I win. Yeah. I think a lot of the times you'll see like that or something, something like that, or maybe like this, maybe, or something like that. It's hard to say. If you're not a spellcaster, if you're a berserker or something, you have no interest in usable spells. You're never going to be able to they're not usable. You're not going to be able to ever get usable spells. So you're not going to go into that. Whereas if you're a spellcaster, you might not give a shit about gold. You might go 2 into usable spells, so on and so forth. But I think something like that is, fairly balanced. I will note that the gold requirement is gold acquired, not counting your starting gold and your starting equipment. Meaning the value of your starting equipment counts against your total. The Amazon starting equipment actually costs quite a bit. 9 plus 7 plus 5 plus 4 is 25. Plus the 10 she starts with on top of that. Means that no matter how much gold she gets, she has to subtract 35 from that to determine her actual, like, victory gold. So if I just acquire 30 gold, and I have 30 gold in my inventory at the end, I did not fulfill that requirement. I actually need 65, like, in my inventory in order for me to get that point. So this is a really cool part of the game, is being able to really just determine your own path to victory and what you want to focus on and what you want to work on for the game. Okay. I think I'll leave it off there. Leave it off there for the first video. I'll let you digest that. We're not even going to get into starting the first turn or anything like that. But yeah, next time we'll tackle how the turn structure works. We're going to get to the Borderlands. We'll do some trading maybe. We'll reveal some monsters perhaps. I don't know if I'll get into combat next time, but we'll see. I might. It depends on how it goes. But all right, that's an introduction to the wide world of Magic Realm. Very exciting stuff. I will note, as a final thing, if this looks very impressive and modern, that's because it is. This is not how the original game from 1979 looked. I should have mentioned that earlier. Years back, I think like 9 years ago or so, an individual on Board Game Geek named Kareem did an extensive redesign of the entire game in order to modernize it, and it looks fantastic now. I don't have... Oh, I might have. The Book of Learning has some images of the original. Alright, so here's the original White Knight art. These are what the original tiles look like. Oh, there you can see... That's the Knights. That's the Order. That's the Order Knights. So let me grab one of the new ones. The Order Knights up here. So that's the original next to the redesign. I mean, it's just a world apart. Not only is it just look better, this is infinitely more usable, because you'll notice there's a lot more numbers on this than on the original. The original, for the notoriety, for the gold cost or the gold value, the reach of their weapon and their weight, that all had to be looked up in a table in the rulebook. Oh, and their armor. That's what this gray border is around the edge. That means they're armored. That's all obfuscated and chucked off into a rulebook. So I can definitely imagine playing the original once I knew everything. Like, if you play this a game enough, you will know that the Order Knight here, he's tremendous weight. He's armored. He's worth 12 notoriety, and his gold value is 8. You will eventually have that shit all memorized. But for learning, oh my god, the redesign, so much better. And I think if for actually playing the game and like getting a copy of the game, I would rather have a copy of the redesign than the original. Just for like a table. It's just so much better. But all right, let's leave it off there. Just under an hour, which is good. I didn't want this to be a 2-hour just like brain burner, and it probably was a bit of a brain burner already. But let me tell you, we haven't even gotten to the tip of the iceberg. Alrighty, my name is Mangg. This has been Magic Realm. I'll see you fine folks in the next part.